Hello and welcome, beautiful soul, to another episode of Permission to Follow Your Inner GPS. We have another amazing guest, Liz Hargreaves, with us today. And when we say permission to follow your inner GPS, we're talking about, and this is especially for women, because for some reason, most of us, including myself, feel we have to have permission in order to do what we came here to do, besides what is expected of us in either the corporate or the private world or whatever world you want to be, living and working in. So, Liz Hargrave supports corporate professionals to stay in their career and live on purpose. She has worked in finance for over 20 years as a pioneer for women in leading management roles. Women, traditionally, who move into the management role generally experience mixed success. And this falls right into line with permission to follow your inner GPS, your inner guided purpose soul path. Hello and welcome, beautiful. It's such a joy to have you all the way from different lands living in the UK.
Thank you, Tina. It's really great to be here. Yes, from London today.
London today, yes. Oh my gosh. We first met at the New Media Summit in September of 2018. Now you give the year because we don't know when people are going to see this. And it was and still is a pure joy to have gotten to know you some and more as the days went on. So please tell us a bit more about who you are and what you do.
I'd love to. And may I just first go back to the New Media Summit? It was absolutely a pleasure to encounter you. And can I tell you something honestly?
Please do.
Being a professional, at first I wasn't certain whether we would connect, but you know how we have. And so you have surprised me and in the most delightful way. So I'm really, really glad that we did meet and that we did have the chance to take it a bit further.
Thank you. I can see, I know I asked you, but since you said that, I can see where I might come off as too airy-fairy and not very professional in the beginning. She talks about angels, she talks about energy and all of that. And yet it's very practical and down to earth, and I am very focused on what it is I'm here to do. And one of those things is to give beautiful souls like you a platform to share your message. So I'm going to be quiet, or we're going to be quiet on this side and give you the floor. So thank you for being here. Go ahead, beautiful.
Thank you so much. So I suppose that's when you're a child, doesn't it? But I'm not going to go into that just at this point. But I was born in New Zealand and I moved to Australia as a young woman, aged 19. And always had a yearning to return to the UK where my parents were born and my ancestral lines lived. So I moved to Australia in order to earn enough money to be able to get there, to be honest. And in the process, I became very interested in banking. Now, turns out banking is actually a passion of mine, even now, after so many years. Because I know what it can do for people. It is a very important part of our societal structure. But I became a pioneer in banking because I was one of the first women to pick up a management role in lending, obviously before me, typically held by men. And honestly, it was a funny old time for me. Apart from moving to Australia where I had to get quite tough because people in Australia can be very tough. Moving into the corporate world, which was in an institutional banking level, was also additionally tough. And in a way, I don't know if this is appropriate language, but I had to grow a set. I had to become a man. And I hope that's not inappropriate.
No, it's not inappropriate because there's so many roles that traditionally men have created and occupied because traditionally women were in the home.
And that's right. These people who were looking at promoting me could not imagine that I could take on the role if I didn't behave like one of them. It was
Right.
really that simple. So I learned all the behaviours. Some of them I'm not so proud of, but it got me there. It got me into that next role. And I would like to say that I really smashed it and really did well, but I felt pregnant.
Ooh.
Pregnancy is wonderful, but I really did feel I'd let the side down, you know. So it was a hell of a conflict, to be honest. And not long after getting that role, my first girl came along, who I might add is a very independent woman, another strong one. And I had to back off. I took the decision actually at that point to give the time to my family raising. I think I felt, having been given that as a child, that my parents gave me that. I felt I wanted to do that for mine. And it was a time when it was still possible. You didn't have to have two parents at work. And it wasn't easy, but we did it. And I returned to work some years later. When I got back to work, back to banking, I was more than a little bit disappointed to see that the progress of the women who had been there, you know, in the time I'd been away, more or less 10 years, wasn't what I expected. I saw two things that were kind of troubling to me. One was that the women who were my peers when I first left with the children, some of them had gone on to more senior positions, but they had retained their masculine behaviours. They were harder on their staff than some of the guys were.
Liz, if you don't mind, when you say the women were harder on their staff, is because there's a perception, and it could be just mine and maybe some other people's, is it a perception that women in general feel they have to be harder, stronger, bigger, more aggressive in order to not only attain but then maintain and continue to move forward in a corporate setting?
I certainly think, I think it's a combination of factors. One thing is that these women who are now sort of potentially coming out the other end because they're in their 50s, these women had to behave like men to get the first roles. So I feel that for them, they haven't had the chance to adapt back to themselves as much. And then, of course, there's other aspects, other influences, like some of the young guys may not take them as seriously, you know, so I haven't had the experience they have had, but they don't seem to have given themselves permission to deploy their compassion as much as they might ordinarily have done had they not gone through that process of management. I think some of the younger women are more capable of applying compassion in situations in banking that I have seen. But then there's this other aspect which I felt was a bit upsetting, was that many women would try on the role of these lending managers, typically or traditionally male-dominated roles, and they backed off because they didn't like them. The roles were not suitable. They were, in essence, to use two words only, they were soul destroying. So,
that's awful, because there is so much that a woman, strong or compassionate or combinations thereof, have to offer, whether it's in corporate or somewhere else, and yet the only roles that we are aware of are the ones that we have seen. Is that an accurate statement?
I think it's becoming quite different in terms of what's available now and how people adapt to them. It's very much a personal journey, and I do actually see some successful women in middle management roles now. It's an interesting game. It's not an easy game, and I still find that there is somehow a kind of mismatch between what a woman brings naturally to life, and by default to her work, and what the role expects of her. So this is a challenge, and I had this challenge when I actually went back to work. To sort of get back to my story, I returned to, in actual fact, to the unit that I'd left ultimately when I had children, although I'd been to another bank in the meantime. When I went back there, I went to a more senior role, and I was really ready for this role until I walked in, and in a month or so down the track, I saw how the management treated the people in a manner which was just not sitting with my values at all, and belittling and all sorts of things that you can imagine, perhaps. But because there was of this old style management, I couldn't live with it, and so I actually opted out of that role, sadly, because really I could have done it really well if I'd wanted to bring the business into that role, but I didn't want to bring it in. So I backed off, and I thought, oh, banking's not for me after all, and I love banking, so it's really was a sad thing. But then I thought, no, I'll try again, but I backed off and went to a lesser role while I supported my then teenage daughter through the final year of high school. and I built myself up again, but I did it in a different way because I had an awakening.
Oh, please tell us about that. What was your awakening?
Oh, it was great. Actually, I'll say that it was due to a close family member. They actually had an awakening, a sort of experience which they confided in me regarding, and I felt a need to try and support them. So it just transpired that their awakening triggered mine. So perhaps that was part of their contract with me. I don't know. But really lovely.
It only matters that you got to where you are now, beautiful. That's all that matters.
Yeah, that's right. So actually, I'd like to talk about that if you don't mind, because this was really synchronistic.
Yes.
Yeah. So my family member, if you like, extended family member, had this problem, and one, I don't know, Saturday or something, my husband and I were driving down the freeway, and we were in need of a cup of tea or something. So he said, I'll just turn right here. He meant to say turn left, but he said turn right. I turned right, and we had a cup of tea, and we happened to have a cup of tea right beside a psychic reader.
Oh, just happened to have a cup of tea beside a psychic reader. Okay, now the things are starting to line up.
From then on, they just started to line up. So in this effort to help someone else, I found this psychic reader, and you know what? I just started exploring. I had the best time exploring. Of course, the first thing I did was a past life regression, just jump in, boots and all. Come on, tell me everything. I want to know everything. And that was a brilliant experience. And I actually spent quite a bit of time working with this woman at a personal level, of course, to develop my own skills and my understanding and realizations and so on. It was just the best time. That set me up for going into my workplace and standing strong when I faced the next challenge. And that was the turning point, really. I had been able, sorry.
That's okay. Isn't it interesting that when you were able to work with this reader, this psychic reader, on your intuitive gifts and skills, stop mixing up my words, guys, gifts and skills, which then gave you more confident empowerment or more empowered confidence to go back into your workplace of choice and really make a difference and not have to get an extra set or grow that set back. Exactly. I love it.
Exactly. I was actually able to get rid of that set. That was the thing. That's
Yay!
oh no, that was fabulous. And I learned so many skills there, which honestly, from the get-go, I managed to fix up things like energy with toxic people, you know, and I was honestly amazed. I still am today, amazed at how impactful simple measures were, really. And it was all around intent, my intent for a situation, and it would work through nicely. So I was able from there to get my way to a really great role, which I excelled in, and where I really created an impact for my employer. It was a very important role in that time. And I'd done it. That's what I wanted to do. I had then reached my goal in terms of my career. Apart from one thing. One thing had something to do with London.
But those kinds of insights through your own intuition, those gut feelings, and what is so amazing is that at least to me, is so many people really are just beginning to get that spirituality. While there are extremes on both ends, like any other place or any other, modality, there's a sense of practicality, and you can bring it into a business who is an entrepreneur. And what I really love is that you're bringing it into the corporate world, because why not?
Well, I think it matters. I think the people need some tools to make their life easier so that they can, in essence, bring their compassion to their workplace and their work situations.
And not lose themselves.
Correct.
That's, you talk about in your bio, helping women primarily, guys if they're smart enough to figure it out. No offense to guys, no ugly emails, okay, everybody? Generally speaking, women who take on these kinds of roles in whatever market, if you will, when we get to corporate, it's like you have to put on this business suit. And I remember attending a conference years ago, and the recommended attire was business. And I thought, okay, well, I can bring out a black suit, but that's so not who I am. And someone looked at me, she says, I don't know who you are. And I said, well, what do you mean? She says, well, you're dressed like somebody else. And I thought, well, yeah, because that's what it was suggested in the handout to do, was casual office attire. I don't have any of that. She says, go upstairs and change whatever you've got and come back down as you, because that is not working. And, it's a much simpler example, but when we get into corporate or something that has this persona, we try to fit ourselves into it. So I love that you're helping the men and women especially, who want to be in corporate, who need to be in corporate, to have a whole different mindset of their own and not try to fit into some kind of a mold that destroys them from the inside out. How can you give us an example of how you do that? Just a little one? I'm curious.
Yeah, okay. An example, let's think.
Well, how would you work with a client? Just, that way.
Okay, well, let's just imagine, for example, working with a client is really about finding out where they're at and who they are and what drives them and what's their key problem, really, and then, of course, understanding how what the potential is to fix that, and trying new things that aren't ordinarily deployed in the corporate workforce. Not in corporate training.
Right, doesn't come in the manual.
No, definitely not. But so impactful, and they're things that we've forgotten to do. And I'd just like to say this, actually. The key, in essence, is to deploy your intuition. And as bankers, we used to use our intuition. When I was first in banking, it was actually an accepted step in our process of lending. we had various measures we would go through, and one of the things we would ask ourselves is, how do we feel about this client or this prospect or this loan or whatever? And that we gave weight to. But then in the 90s, things shifted around, and intuition was largely abandoned. And I think that was a mistake, because the people who I see who have most success now actually do use their intuition and act very quickly on it. So I think that is the key, intuition itself. So my endeavour or my aim with people is to really to trigger their, or get them to practice their intuitive muscle, and to give them some practical tools which are easy to deploy while they're at work. And when you start doing a few of these things, you realize that you have potential to do a few more, take a few more actions which are actually a bit more impactful. And in the end, you sort of get on a roll and get better and better at working towards your goals. So actually, one thing that I like to do with people is actually past life regression. And it's really about exploring their own recollection, if you like, of past lives, and how they may impact or not. I mean, maybe it's not even necessary to know that, but it's a lot of fun to do, and it can actually answer some questions about issues which may have come up.
I agree. Past life regression, past life issues can and often do play a role in, not necessarily to correct issues. For some people, absolutely yes, just as you said, and others is just wanting to have some of the answers to fill in some of the puzzle pieces.
Yes. Yeah. And I think activities like that are very empowering. When you realize there's that much more to you, that you know you're a much deeper person than you've ever really been led to believe, which maybe you knew as a child, but you don't know now because it's really been conditioned and programmed out of you, as we've been turned into whatever our corporate requires of us. It is actually really nice to reconnect, and I think that gives the individual a sort of core strength. And I might add, man or woman, there are a lot of men who are interested in this work, but they tend not to be so visible about it.
It's not yet accepted. Well, it is more accepted, but it's not accepted for men yet, because then that it taps into something that they can't see, manage, or I don't like the word control, but men in general are taught to have this control over their emotions and the way they present themselves and this and that. Is that fair?
Look, that's a legacy piece, and I think that it's true of many. I think it's probably possibly true of many people that they're, taught to be this and that. But mind you, generationally, we're changing. Younger children are coming in a bit different. But I can tell you that my husband talks from time to time with colleagues, and you would be surprised how many people, men included, are accepting and opening up to their own inner self, or their own knowledge, their own inner wisdom.
I'm really glad about that, because so many men, and this may sound like we're pinging on guys, and we're really not, because we as a global worldwide culture need to have more of a balance between the male and female energies. And this isn't about changing anybody. It is about what is it you want to do. And Liz, you're helping women and men who want to stay in the corporate world and be true to themselves. That's got to be sometimes a very delicate balance, beautiful.
Well, yes, I think the trick where it gets difficult is where you can't actually be true to yourself, and you have, because what you're being asked to perform is right against your values. I teach people how to manage that, really.
That's important. That's important, because jobs have to be maintained. and you know, the service that the corporation as a whole would also need to be maintained in order to stay viable for everyone who works there, hopefully as ethical as possible.
That's right. I mean, I don't think there are any people who intend to be malevolent around this. It's sort of how corporates have evolved, and you know, with the profit imperative. But there are some changes I do see, and I'm really pleased to be able to say that my old employer from Australia is leading the way in many respects in terms of respecting all of its stakeholders. Because only 2 or 3 years ago, really the employee and the customer didn't really matter terribly much, which is an odd concept to me, because, you know.
Well, without the customers, you don't need employees. You know, you don't have that profit line. I would bet to venture a lunch anyway, that your influence and the way you are, the way you have allowed you to become this bright, shining, beautiful light of compassion and strength, because it does take strength and courage to do what you're doing. And it's not about changing so much the culture, I don't think, and I could be wrong about that, but it's more about how to help those within the corporate structure to manage their values, manage what they're doing, and be as true to themselves as they possibly can. And what a beautiful blend of both worlds.
Mm. Well, it is, because for many people, the option, you know, the alternative, you know, life purpose takes you away from your corporate world. Well, they don't want that. People have invested a great deal in their professional life, and they want to stay there. And you know, like, I still have a love of it. This is why I work with bankers as often as I can, because I love banking. And it sounds odd, really odd, but you know, I see what it means. I see what it does for people, and I get a great deal of joy when I see what people can do with proper banking services. Now,
Exactly.
How corny that sounds, but still, this is my motivation.
Well, if we didn't have banking services and organized services like that, what would we, as people, the population of whatever country, then do? How would things get moving? How would we even be able to have this conversation with you in the UK and me in Texas? Because banking is a part of just about everything.
Yes, that's where the level of sophistication comes from, isn't it? Being able to create efficiencies through these larger organisations, and banking, of course, is the means of exchange. So it's critical. You need a means of exchange. We've had stones, we've had you know, coins, we've had all sorts of means of exchange over the years, wool, whatever. But yeah, I still really feel banking is very important, and so I know that when men or women can access that inner strength, which helps them to stand in their power, it sounds so corny. I would like to find more words for that, to be perfectly honest, but help them stand strong, knowing who they are. They can then handle what comes at them, and there will be plenty of things come at them, because it's the nature of the organisation, the nature of working in a big organisation.
Well, beautiful lady, I, for one, am really happy that there is at least one of you. Hopefully there are others like you who are working in or with corporate structures in general to help those who really want to stay be more effective for themselves. And I hope that that's a correct word, because it, you know, when we follow our own purpose, and some people just want to be accountants and some want to be CEOs. So why not empower these beautiful souls even more to do what they came here to do? Because we do need and crave leaders who are in touch with themselves and can blend all of these different pieces that you shared with us. How powerful that, it may be the only word we have in human, but it's important to be empowered and confident and be able to live our purposes no matter what they are.
I agree. And the best part about it, it gives people a chance to help others along the way. And
Yes.
then we grow a movement, and then we have community. Well,
yes.
you know,
Absolutely.
I can stop there.
Well, thankfully, your husband said, we need a spot of tea, or the both of you decided you needed some tea. And he said, right, when he meant left, because, you know, that started it at that point. It would have still happened, but maybe just not right then when you sat right next to a psychic reader of all people.
I know, it's amazing.
It is. Would you please tell our viewers and listeners how they can find you and contact you, beautiful?
Oh, yeah, sure. So my website is authenticadvancement.com. And I'm happy for people to email if they like, which is liz@authenticadvancement.com.
And that's Liz
Yep.
at authenticadvancement.com. And her website is authenticadvancement.com. And this lady is a beautiful soul. I love what she's doing, because how many coaches actually help those get out of corporate? Nothing wrong with that. And yet this beautiful soul is helping those who want to stay and be prosperous and abundant, not just for the dollars, but for their soul, for their purpose, and for the largeness of all of our population, and helping those behind them. Again, that is authenticadvancement.com, and her email is Liz, Liz, at authenticadvancement.com. This was awesome. I really enjoyed it. I hope you did too.
I've had a great time. Thank you so much, Cherry Marie.
You're welcome, beautiful. And beautiful soul, thank you for being with us again. Please do share these podcasts and the videos with your friends and colleagues. You never know who's going to find that one or two golden nuggets within the journeys and the obstacles or the challenges that have been shared. And do stop by angeldreamteam.com and get your own free gift, Angels, Success, and Prosperity. Become a mover and shaker of your reality. Thank you, and we'll see you again soon. Bye-bye for now.